Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it. This is titled COLLAB Chats. This is something that we've been talking about, trying to figure out something to get all of you in a room together. And my name is Jed Splittgerber. I'm with Mid-Century Homes and HB Workplaces, Sprague Studios. This is their awesome space. So let's clap. Thank you for having them host. It's such an awesome thing that we get to have this in Boise. And I remember traveling to big cities and only being able to go to like a DWR, and this is so much better than a DWR. So I appreciate being able to be here. So we're going to do these quarterly. At the end, we'll talk about what the subjects are coming up. And this first one is called Mid-Century Icons. And so that is not only the furniture, so these pieces that we're surrounded by, but the designers that's behind them. So I've known Dan and Tracy for years. We've worked on a bunch of creative projects together. And so when their company, Sprague Solutions, merged with Henricks and Butler, which Jeff was somewhere, but he's over there, we knew that we wanted to do something in this space. So Mid-Century Homes, with them, we combined this to create this collab chat. So this is the first one that we are doing. And so I'll give you a little background here on Mid-Century Homes, our company. We're a real estate team in the Boise area. There's 11,000 mid-century homes in the area, built between 1950 and 1969. And we love this era of architecture. There's about 10 of us on the team. Does that sound right, TJ? Nine. Okay, 9. And we primarily work in here, but we've been called into other projects outside of the area. Most recently, the Pearsall house, Adrian Pearsall's house. We've been fortunate enough to market that. And that's still on the market. If anyone wants to move to Pennsylvania, we'll give you details on that. And so HB Workplaces, I'm going to hand it over to Tracy to give a little background on their business.
Welcome to the space. Everybody hear me okay? Welcome to our space. We're so excited to have you here. We are HB Workplaces, like Jen mentioned, and really a combining of two companies that came together because of a manufacturer that also came together, and we'll get into that. But Henricks and Butler, Herman Miller dealer, Sprague Solutions, Knoll dealer, and we feel like we've come together to kind of provide the best of the best and create a space that hopefully is inspirational, not just to you, but to the community, for you to use, to come in, look at pieces, and have wonderful people like Jed here to kind of do presentations and teach us more about the great designers that make up the manufacturers we represent.
Yeah, that's great. So the next we're going to look at is the brand. Oh, sorry, you sat too soon.
I know. I'm sorry. So Herman Miller, I think, is one of those iconic brands, very familiar to people, enduring brand. Sometimes we even think of it as joyful. You see these lovely pops of color. And, you'll see some of the influences even when you walk through the space, and people like Gerard who have made up the brand, but so much a mid-century modern brand, right? And that is what we know Herman Miller for. Knoll, founded a little bit later than Herman Miller, but very influenced our interior design community with one of the founders, Florence Koll herself. A great designer, but we often think of luxurious brand, modern always. That's kind of some of Knoll's taglines. Very iconic pieces, and you'll see in the presentation today, very recognizable pieces that also start to fit into that same kind of time frame. So in 2021, Herman Miller acquired Knoll. And so these two iconic brands came together to provide a greater offering of just these beautiful pieces that we're seeing in our showroom, but all the other all the other places like a DWR or wherever you're familiar with as far as those mid-century modern brands. We're excited. Like it says right there, they joined forces. So we like to think of ourselves as a force in the furniture world. Really, that just means we're very nerdy about furniture. We get pretty excited about it. So, and you'll see in Jed's presentation that we love what we do, and we're grateful for these guys to be here today. I want to make sure everybody has a chair. There are lots of chairs in the spaces. And please feel free to come get closer.
There's some front row seats up here, sofa.
Up here if someone doesn't have a chair, and please eat the food.
Yeah, don't feel like you have to sit here and watch everything. There's a lot of content we're going to dive into, so grab another drink, food, so on, for sure.
Like I said at the beginning, welcome to our space. Super grateful for Mid-Century Modern Homes being here, helping us kind of show off our space.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Appreciate it. So yeah, this is really a powerhouse brand collective. MillerKnoll is, Herman Miller and Knoll coming together is pretty amazing. So these are kind of the brands behind the pieces, and the designers we're gonna look at here, there's 5 of them, which I feel like I should have picked 3 because this is a lot. So I'm gonna try to talk fast, and we're gonna look at a ton of stuff, but these designers were primarily like starting with Mies van der Rohe here. We're gonna look at Mies, the Eameses, Knoll, Saarinen, and Nelson. And so in Boise, when we talk about mid-century homes, we look at 1950 to 1969. But like a lot of things, Boise is a little bit late to the party. So Mies was working early on this. Early 20s, he was moving from the modern industrial age that came after World War I, and his avant-garde work was, they paved the way for all these designers that started producing really in the 30s, and that ushered in the mid-century modern period that was 1945 to 1969. So the first on our list here is Mies, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He's German. He early on started in the late 1800s, and he was an architect, an academic, a furniture and interior designer, and he's known as one of the pioneers of modern architecture. So not only are the work that they left behind very important, but so are their words. So we're going to look at quotes for each of these people to gain some insight into their creative genius. So from Mies, we have less is more. A chair is a very difficult object. A skyscraper is almost easier, which he designed plenty of later in Chicago in his career. And then he said, it's better to be good than to be original, which is something you commonly hear in art, that nothing's completely new. So looking at some of his fast facts here, we have the Barcelona Pavilion. Is anyone familiar with this? Maybe, yes. This was in 1929. He designed it for the International Exposition in Barcelona, Spain, which was the World's Fair. And you can actually still tour the structure today as it's a museum. But one of the lesser known facts about this building is that it was torn down in 1930. Am I cutting out? Yeah. Okay. So you can still tour this as a museum today, but one of the lesser known facts is that after the World's Fair, this was torn down in 1930. It's very controversial. Everyone thinks this is the original building, but this wasn't actually built until 1986. From the historical drawings and the original footings, the modern day architects rebuilt this. And so Mies originally designed this to be bare, no exhibits. The building was the exhibit for the World Fair. That was the attraction. And it only contained one single sculpture. And there was one piece of furniture he designed specifically for this building, which we were gifted this little gem, which I'm sure you all recognize. This is the Barcelona chair and stool, 1929. That's actually it in that building, the pavilion. And this is easily one of the most iconic pieces of modern furniture design. And this shows how a piece of furniture was birthed from a space. They work both ways. But one of the other designers that we'll explore, and lots of his pieces are around here, is Eero Saarinen. And he said, always design a thing by considering its next larger context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment, and an environment in a city plan. And he also would say even deeper than that, a spoon on a plate on a table in a room, which I feel like you've done in this space too. You've got very granular into it. So the next example that ties into that we'll look at is the Barcelona table. And this, if you look at the frame, the X frame where the table comes together, there's these chrome-clad cruciform here that is actually, if we go back a couple, all the supports on here, that's what that's from, and from that shape, he actually had pulled together that to develop it. Next we're gonna look at is, Mies was actually the last director of the Bauhaus, which is German for building house. It was an art school that operated from 1919 to 1933, and it was famous for its approach to international design, which basically took away all the ornamentation in favor of the function, was the emphasis of it. So ultimately, the Nazis killed this project because it was too avant-garde for them. And so at that time, Mies was pushed out of his homeland, Germany, and does anyone know where he went? You'll never guess. Wyoming. He moved to Wyoming. You didn't know that, yeah. He moved to Wyoming for his first U.S. residential house that he lived on the premise for 2 months, designed it, figured out the perfect spot for it, and ultimately the person who owned the land said it cost too much. So from there, he took off to Chicago, which is where he did so much of his work there in Chicago, and that's where he worked on skyscrapers and so on. But this one is probably one of my most famous structures. It's the Farnsworth House. It's outside of Chicago. And this one I like to draw attention to because not all furniture is perfect for the house. Dr. Farnsworth, who commissioned this, let Mies design whatever he wanted for the house, but she didn't like any of his furniture. So brought in his modernist contemporaries. A lot of Florence Knoll furniture was put in the house. And this is on 50 acres outside of Chicago, so it's open for tours. If you're over there, you should definitely check it out. So we'll buzz through some of the notable works from Mies. Obviously, the Barcelona chair, one of the most recognized objects of the last century. And then also from the Barcelona collection is the sofa, and I can't help but think of like the TV shows and the movies where there's a psychiatrist talking to someone. They're like sitting on this. So all of these pieces are art that creative directors and directors of photography are using in pieces. You see it in furniture all the time because they're so beautiful in advertising and movies and so on. And then the BRNO chair is constructed from a single frame of bent steel. I love the cantilever design of this. It looks as good at a dining room table as it does a conference room. Dan has a couple of these in his office, right?
He does. And I also, that's a flat bar Bruno chair. There's also kind of like a tubular one. And I believe the tubular one also comes across the back of the chair, which is kind of a lovely detail, especially when you're gonna look at the back of a chair, right? The front should look as good as the back.
Exactly. So that's Mies. We're going to move on to the Eames, which is actually the Eameses. A lot of people don't know this. It's a husband and wife team of Charles and Ray. And I selected this photo very specifically because it shows their partnership so well, because Charles used to always say, anything I can do, Ray can do better. And she was a powerhouse of design and did so much of their work, but most people are always like, it's Charles Eames. But Ray was involved in so much. So looking at a couple quotes here, Charles said, the details are not the details make the product. And Ray said, what works good is better than what looks good because what works good lasts. And that's so ironic because everything they designed is beautiful. And so it wasn't actually the primary intent. Function came first. And they used to, their goal was to design the best for the most. And they would always say, we don't do art, we solve problems. They didn't see themselves as artists, they saw themselves as problem solvers. And their goal was always, how can we produce on a mass level? So create designs for that. So looking back to 1941, this is the Kazam machine. They invented this in their LA apartment as a solution to that goal of mass producing complex curves of the bent plywood furniture. And they were experimenting with this tooling when, during World War II, they were brought a problem to solve, which was a lot of the servicemen had these metal splints that caused vibrations, and they would get further injuries as they broke bones. And so through that little Kazam machine, they actually explored this molded plywood splint, and there were 150,000 of these produced during the war, and that got them going, thinking about how they could use this material. And that's actually how they created the LCW chair, which is this one right here that has fabric on it, and the countless bentwood plywood furniture that followed. So that's the look at the LCW chair, which is also very recognizable. They were simple in their naming. They were all acronyms. So LCW is lounge chair wood. Also the same year in 1946, we got the DCM, which is dining chair metal. Additionally, they have a dining chair with wood legs, which is DCW, and a lounge chair with metal legs, which is LCM. Very simple, but kind of confusing. It gets more and more confusing. But so, and then moving to 1950, we have the molded shell chairs, and these really don't need an introduction. They're one of the most produced designs, but this really shows the mass production, how one general design can be so unique by variation. They changed the legs so you can have the dowel legs, the metal legs, casters, rocking chair, and then what they're made of: wood, metal, fiberglass, plastic, upholstery, and their height, everything from dining to task to counter and so on. And there's a bunch around. Alex is sitting in one right now. You don't have to stand up. It's cool. And I did bring a I think it's still over there. Yeah, that's one of the earliest. That's in 54, 55 of very early one. You can sit in it. It's a little rusty. This is one of the earliest. This is a DAR. It's dining, because that's the height, arm for arm, and then the R is rod, which this later became called the Eiffel. But the original one of these actually had, when they first experimented, had a rope that went around this whole edge that the fiberglass was wrapped around. So if you're at a house, estate sale or whatever, and you see one of those with a rope on it, buy it. It's like $1,000 or less, it's well worth it. Buy it. I'll buy it from you after that. So moving on to the storage units they designed in 1950. This is really interesting because what they created with the bent wood, they actually use more for aesthetics. You can see the embossed circles up there, and this is a very modular design where they had a pretty simple, where you can just adjust the height and color depending on what people need in an office environment. This is actually a look at one half of a sheet from their catalog. So you can see simple design that they spent a lot of time perfecting one thing, and then the amount that you can scale it. So you could walk into an office environment and it's one type of furniture, but everyone has a variation to help like what their need is through the office or different rooms and so on. So looking at some of the works, of course, the lounge chair and ottoman, by far one of the most significant designs of the 20th century. I'm sure you've all seen this design. I don't know if you've all sat in one, but there's at least one in the corner, right? So go sit in that. The Eames goal in this chair was to create a chair with a warm, receptive look of a well-used first baseman's mitt. And these chairs definitely take some breaking in, and then they're much more comfortable over time. The aluminum group chair, which these right here are the soft pad version of them around the table we're at here. And this actually began as a challenge between designers Saarinen and Alexander Gerard, who were designing a home in Indiana, and they wanted a high quality seat with, for outdoor use, and this was originally designed with a mesh fabric. They reached out to the Eames, again, to problem solve for it, and so this was a much different design with the mesh back because they were less reliant on a solid chair like this, where the frame houses so much of it. So these were originally outdoor furniture, but they evolved into, a lot of times you see them now in office environments, but they're still available in lounge chairs. They have ottoman version, and they brought back the mesh fabric, I think, fairly recently.
Yes, I think you are right. And then that chair is also back in that back corner where we call our home office, back by the Eames Lounge.
Oh yeah.
So you can
Yep.
see that back there.
Right together, yeah, this one, exactly, the same one, nice. So other notable work, this is their house and studio that they built in 1949. It was part of the case study program in California, which is also the subject of our next collab chat. So I'm not gonna dig too deep into it, but it was Arts and Architecture magazine put it on there. They put it on basically commissioned designs from Richard Neutra, Craig Elwood, Pierre Koenig, A. Quincy Jones, Eames, Saarinen, and others to design these houses. And we'll talk a lot more about that in 3 months in February, but what I want to draw attention to is on the furniture here, you can see Charles and Ray sitting there. In the back, there's this alcove, this built-in L-shaped seating. The ceiling there is dropped to 8 feet standard height then. I think the full height is 16 to 17 feet. So it's much more cozy back in there in that corner. And they custom built this in this area, and they worked with trying to figure out the best angles for the most comfortable seating for this space that they would have like their intimate gatherings would be back in there. And this is 1949, through that actually created the sofa compact. You can see there's a detailed shot over there. They're actually building this sofa specifically off something they did custom at their house. And this is actually also a case study house, the Stahl House, case study number 22, and this is by far one of the most iconic mid-century houses, which us on the team are grateful. We spent a lot of time. Some people have swam in the pool, right? TJ's jumped off the roof of this house into the pool. Great house in the Hollywood Hills, but it's so that's a look at the Eameses. Next on our list is Florence Knoll. And those dates are accurate, 1917 to 2019. She was 101, and she just only a handful of years ago passed away.
Okay, I know I'm going to interrupt your...
You take over.
I don't know if it's better for me to talk into this or not. Is that even working?
It's not doing anything.
Okay.
Probably turned on.
Okay, I'm just gonna...
You're good. We can hear you.
So, this is kind of a weird, incredible story that sorry.
No, don't apologize, Tracy. Go for it.
We live up on the bench. These people are moving in across the street, and I'm like, Dan, you gotta come see. I think our people are moving in across the street, and I see them bringing in Saarinen tables and a Bertoya, and I was like, who is this? Anyway, a couple weeks later, I'm outside. The gentleman comes out and he sees me, and he says, "Hey guys, I heard a rumor that you guys are the Knoll dealer," and it's like we started talking, and he goes, "So my wife is Florence Knoll's daughter-in-law," and I about dropped. I couldn't even believe it. Anyway, Florence Knoll herself never had children of her own, but when Hans Knoll passed away years later, she remarried. Bassett was his last name. He had 2 boys. She was married to one of those boys. They were twin boys. George passed away, and she's since remarried. Moved from Florida to California to Boise, Idaho. Our neighbor. So, anyway, pretty cool. Right here in Idaho.
And then I sold their house. It's true. Yeah, now they're back to somewhere else. Yeah, wild stories. So Florence Knoll, 101, she gave us lots of gifts. Here's a quote, I needed a piece of furniture. It was not there, so I designed it myself. And some of the designers, that's as simple as their thinking is she referred to these pieces as fill-in pieces, and they're iconic now. Her sofa, there's some out I think just in the lobby, yes. Which we'll check out as well. But yeah, these were all fill-in pieces. It was a need, and so she created something to fill the space.
Office, the flowery wallpaper has a lot of her pieces in it too.
Right. So we're going to go pretty deep into Florence Knoll here, just because it's so important to understand her design foundation. And we could do a whole presentation on Cranbrook schools, but basically she grew up in Michigan. She was orphaned at a young age in 1932. She went to this boarding school, and she developed an interest in architecture. And she ultimately caught the attention of L.E.L. Saarinen, who was the president of Cranbrook Academy of Art, the larger school there. And his son is Eero Saarinen, who we're going to look at as well. But they basically adopted her. They would take her to Finland with their family, and she became really close with his son, Eero Saarinen. And she eventually then, back when she was only 18, was exploring furniture designs, experimenting with Charles Eames and Eero Saarinen back at Cranbrook. And so that's where she ended up getting her formal education in architecture, studying at the academy. And then she went on to study under Mies van der Rohe in Chicago, and that's ultimately where she got her degree in architecture. So all of these connections, the collaboration between them is so tight. So after graduating, she moved to New York City and worked for several architecture firms. She ended up meeting Hans Knoll, who she did some design projects with. And Hans, as you mentioned, his family owned a furniture company in Germany that was designing or developing a lot and selling the furniture for a lot of the Bauhaus movement. But he ended up moving to the US in '38, starting Knoll Furniture. She spent a couple years working with him, and then they ended up getting married, and that's where Knoll Associates came to be, as she was a full partner. I don't know if it was she had to get married to become a full partner, or she was a partner and got married, but they're around the same time. But it was 1940. So she created the Knoll Planning Unit in 1946, and this revolutionized the way that companies approach workplace design. She literally shaped the look and feel of a modern office as we know it. You can see here, these were the designs she made, and then that's the actual space to the left. So super intricate down to the art. She would lay these out to get the flow of the space, and then that's the finished area there. Here's a very detailed one of an office building. This was, I don't think anyone was doing anything like this, right?
No, she was the first, and even like how she did samples, and she was very influenced on weaving and textiles, and she was using like men's suiting materials because that's really all that was available, and it was frustrating her, so let's create a textile company.
Exactly. And that also is true, speaking of these pieces. You go online and you can buy any of this stuff, but pretty much everything here, you can sit down with Tracy and pick out whatever material you want. It's amazing. So next we'll look at her collaboration with designers at Knoll, which was pretty cutting edge. She brought in architects and artists to help design furniture because it added a whole nother level of creativity. Osamu Noguchi, who did this chair here, the Tribeca, and Harry Batoya, she's credited with bringing them to do iconic pieces for Knoll. And she was so respected by the designers because she would make sure they got paid and got credit for their work, which wasn't all that common back then. And it opens up the question, if you're a furniture designer and you just love creating furniture, like how do you sell it? You need someone like Knoll or Herman Miller to really produce the stuff and market it and get it out there. So looking at some of her work, this is the Florence Knoll sofa. It's, as they say, it's completely timeless. She thought that she was just creating these fill-in pieces, but they're all simple, as they say, but none of them plain. And as these skyscrapers rose up across America post-World War, she was trying to translate this vocabulary of a skyscraper inside an office building, and that's how this modern interior was born from her work. And people like Noguchi and Saarinen and Bertoia were much more sculptural, where hers was very architectural and very like boxy and super clean and minimal. Here's a look at the Model 31 and 33, which is actually just got reissued by Knoll.
It was just reissued, and that's a shot from the Chicago showroom as it looks as of yesterday. I really was just there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. That is a Bertoia sculpture in the corner that she just commissioned. She had commissioned, and they have it, and it's in the Knoll showroom in Chicago right now.
Very cool.
So what's the price of the recommission?
You know what? I haven't priced one out because is Dan around the corner?
Yeah.
Dan, is it
I don't even
officially
know if it's-
order entry?
I don't even know if it's orderable yet, but it is coming available. So it's just introduced.
If it's on the website, then we can order it, but it is that new that I don't know the pricing on it. And then of course, depending on the fabrics, right? That's gonna change the price quite a bit too.
This is why after this, talk to all of us or set up a meeting with them for sure. Also, the coffee tables in here, those are marble, granite, glass, wood. They have such a different look. There's some in here, some out in the lobby as well. This is the table desk, which I believe is in your office too. Yeah, so this is a good example of how she rethought workplace design. An executive's functions primarily communication. It's a big thing they do, and there were these big bulky desks that you would, walk in to come talk to your boss, and you're behind this huge desk. So she created this to open up communication and really just connect with people and simplify the design of that. And then her problem solving from that also meant if you have a big desk with all these drawers and you get rid of all the drawers, where do you put all your stuff? So that's where this credenza was created that would normally sit either behind the table desk or off to the side, which is also in your office, right?
It is.
So you put your junk away, not right out in front, and she was always thinking about, how to satisfy the solution.
No, Florence might be disappointed in me sometimes because I'm not sure all my junk gets put away all the time.
So that's Florence Knoll. We got two more. We got Eero Saarinen, 1910-61. He actually was only 50-51. He had a brain tumor, sadly, and so a lot of the work that we're going to look at, like his architectural work, he never got to see the completion of, unfortunately. So he said, experimentation can present great dangers, but there would be greater danger if we didn't try to explore at all. And function influences, but does not dictate form. So if you're trying to solve the form versus function, this is Eero's solution. And you can tell he never thought anything was actually set. So everyone recognize this? The Gateway Arch in St. Louis. So you can see how early it was designed in 47, but it wasn't completed until 65, so after he passed away. And this has a fun story behind it because the city of St. Louis had a call for entries to design this landmark, and hundreds were submitted, but it came down to 5 finalists. And a telegram was sent to E. Saarinen's office, which went to his dad, L.E.L. Saarinen, congratulating on him being a finalist, but next door was Eero's office, the actual finalist. So he beat his dad into as a finalist and ultimately was awarded this design, which it was actually his first design unaided by his father. How about this? Has anyone seen this? The TWA Flight Center. So this was used as a terminal up to 2001, and then it was converted 2015, 2019 as a hotel, the TWA Hotel, which is full of Knoll furniture now, right?
Thing is, I have not seen this in person. I've only seen photos, so it's part of my bucket list.
Yeah, you can go stay there.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. So TWA Hotel, if you want to look at photos and so on. So the womb chair, one of his most well-known designs, and this is when he was exploring design with Charles Eames, and he was trying to develop something out of fiberglass chairs, and then Florence Knoll approached him and said, why not take the bull by the horns and do the big one first? I want a chair that's like a basket full of pillows, something I can curl up in. And then this is what was born out of that. And one in the corner, and
one in Dan's office. Yep.
So check it out, sit in it. I think we all say this is more comfortable than the Eames lounge chair. Maybe this is an arguable thing. Very.
I know you're.
I mean, yes.
I like to look at the pretty Eames chair.
Yes.
But I want to sit in the wooden chair. So just get both.
Then you can choose, yeah.
I'm a Bowman recliner, so I'm happy to choose.
So we'll look at the tables here, pedestal collection. He said he was working to resolve the ugly, confusing, unrestful world underneath tables and chairs, and he accomplished it through this. More legroom, less visual noise. These come in 16-inch side tables, which you probably have a bunch around, and then 96-inch oval dining.
There's some little guys over there, all the way to some of these big guys, and it'll actually come one size bigger than this.
Which is, yeah, probably the 96 is the... And then the tulip chair, also part of the pedestal collection. He was solving what he called the slum of legs, having 4 legs under a table through this. And he had a complex modeling system where he did these at scale, eventually made them larger and larger until he had these tests in his house, and he used his friends and family as guinea pigs to like sit in one and be like, how does it feel? And then ultimately, this is where it landed. The executive chair of 1957, one of almost every Florence Knoll design space, she utilized this chair in it. And it's been one of Knoll's most popular chairs for 70 years or so. It
is a very popular chair. The stools you guys are sitting on and around the stool version with the wood legs. You can get that with wood legs or tubular legs.
So our last designer we're looking at is Nelson, George Nelson. He said that the work of a designer should be to better the world. He believed nature was already perfect, but man ruined it by making things that didn't follow the rules of nature. So he never intended to be an architect, but at Yale, he ended up stumbling upon an architecture student's work, a display, and then he switched gears, ended up getting an architecture degree at Yale, and then he was awarded a fellowship to study architecture in Rome for 2 years, where he met all these modernist pioneers, including Mies van der Rohe, that heavily influenced his design. So a couple quotes from him: unless ideas are massaged into reality, they evaporate. And you don't think your way into creative work, you work your way into creative thinking, which I love because it's still hard work. There's no creative genius that just has a perfect chair on the first try. It's a lot of hard work. He was the design director at Herman Miller from 46 to 72, so basically that whole mid-century modern period, he was there, and he brought over Charles and Ray Eames, Isamu Noguchi, Alexander Girard to do work for Herman Miller. So this is really interesting to me. It's the cover of Life magazine from 1945. He created this storage wall concept as part of a book that was less focused on these futuristic houses. There were all these like the house of the future at the time, and he was trying to solve these simple problems like a mudroom, like where do I put everything? What's the garage? And so this showed up on Life magazine, and then over the years, he developed this into the comprehensive storage system for Herman Miller in 1959, which anyone that's seen a mid-century interior, that's seen these wall units, this was part of what he developed through that. The platform bench of 1947 here, it's iconic for entryways in mid-century homes. But originally it was a workhorse. It was to house a plant, speaker cabinet, records, somewhere to sit. And now, I mean, there's so many houses you see this in.
I actually just learned yesterday, so the whole storage component that's part of the bench that you're seeing there, they're actually kind of coming out with some new and updated pieces
Cool.
too. So we'll see what that means. But
Now that everyone wants a place for their records again, finally.
that's right.
So the bubble lamps. There's a really cool story behind this. Back in 1947, as he was the design director, he was obsessed with this Swedish-made spherical lamp that was constructed of silk. But he said, his quote was, "We had a modest office, and I felt that if I had one of those big hanging spheres from Sweden, it would show that I was really with it, a pillar of contemporary design." But it cost $125 and he couldn't afford it. So he remembered this photograph from a newspaper of these fleet of ships being sprayed with this self-webbing plastic for preservation and storage. And so he thought, wow, I can build this. So he built a wireframe. Within 24 hours, he tracked down this Navy's mothball spray, and he created a plastic-covered lamp, and then you put a light in it, and it glows. And back over there, there's all different. It basically looks like that.
It does. I always like to joke that we couldn't decide on which shape and size, so we just chose them all. But there is also a floor lamp. No, they don't come just hanging, so there's floor lamp.
And in the painting right here too, which is a whole nother, this was a commissioned painting that they had done by a local Boise artist, Betsy Richardson, and a key element in there. So bumping ahead to, we've got the coconut chair, which is not commonly seen, but it shows Nelson's creativity. And then the pedestal collection over here on the right, that's a workhorse, indoor, outdoor, and there's, I think, just one stool on that side. Is that the, but.
It has a green fabric on it. Sitting amongst the workstations, you'll see one.
You can move it around, does so much.
And I think in Jeff's office there might be, is Jeff there? Is that your table and your side table?
Yes.
That's, yeah. That's
Okay.
a side table.
Then the marshmallow sofa, which is a super unique design, very playful, and will brighten most any room. Wall clocks. He designed these over 1949 to 1960. Super iconic. He also did, there's desk clocks kind of throughout, but the one that I want to point out is this ball clock, which I'm sure we've all seen right here, because there's a super fun story behind that. Involving a heavy night of drinking between George Nelson, Noguchi, and a few other designers. They were one-upping each other with sketches, and in the morning he woke up, saw the pile of sketches, and that one was on the table. And his quote regarding the sketch, even though he put it into production, was, "I don't know to this day who cooked it up. I know it wasn't me. I asked Irving, he said no. And we don't know who actually did it." So they don't remember who did it. They were probably playing cards. Yeah. But you can see, obviously, he has plenty of other good designs that are his on there. So that also shows how tight-knit all these designers were during that period. There was competition between Knoll and Herman Miller, but a lot of these designers were doing things for both of them. So that's kind of where we get to this collaboration, this common thread from these designers, the companies they're working with, you working with the designers, us working with homeowners, and it's always just better when everyone comes together and helps each other out, because that's how these amazing products and finished product comes together. And so I want to look at just a couple of these old photos to show you how close these guys were. They were friends. This is actually the 1961 centerfold of Playboy magazine that they were in here. So you've got Nelson there, Saarinen, and what's Saarinen sitting in? What's the name of the chair? Do you remember? Womb, the womb chair. Harry Bertoya, and then Charles is here in either a DCM or an LCM, I can't tell height-wise. Then some of these other guys, Edward Wormley, Harry Bertoya, and Jen Zrinsom as well. And then this shot here is the Knoll crew early. This was early 50s. You've got Hans and Florence in the middle, Harry Bertoya off to the side, and then Herbert Matter, who is basically he gave the graphic design vocabulary of the mid-century period. He did from print ads to typography. He was really well known for all that. And then this is a really early photo, Charles Eames and Eero Saarinen. Off to the left here, this is a 1939 exhibition, them designing furniture back at, through Cranbrook, and they're actually in their 20s at this period, so they've been working together for so long. Then over here is a Herman Miller crew from an exhibition in 1975. Robert Probst, he developed the Action Office System, which later became known as the Cubicle, like it or not. DJ Dupree, he was the founder of Herman Miller, and then you've got the Eames off to the side, George Nelson in the middle, and then Alexander Girard, which could have easily moved into one of the other spots. He was well known for furniture design, textiles, typography. These wooden dolls are all his, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it was a mouthful. Are we all good? That was it. And Ray, I got them first? Yeah. So we'll do a little Q&A. We're happy to answer whatever. And also, don't feel like you have to scatter after. Wander around. The lobby has a ton of great furniture, too. You can head out the back there, ask us any questions, furniture, real estate related, whatever you want. But save the date. We're going to do 3 more of these. We're going to do them quarterly. So the next one in February is the case study program. In May, we'll do revolutionary textiles, and then a little deep dive more into that German Bauhaus movement, which I'm really into the early modern because I think it paved the way a lot for the mid-century modern that followed. And so we'll post about this stuff, but it's all going to be available at collabchats.eventbrite.com is where that will be listed. So happy to open up any questions, or there's so much food you can just go eat it.
Please have more food. I also just want to say you're welcome to wander anywhere and be sure and sit in and stuff because it's not museum quality. We sell it on an everyday basis, so
But
I
it
want
is
you.
in museums.
It is museum.
MoMA, a lot of it's in MoMA.
But it is meant to sit in and try in, so don't feel like you can't go into any of the offices. The lobby's got Florence Knoll, the Barcelona chair, Florence Knoll coffee tables, but Plattner as well. So wander around, take a look.
If I am not in a company that is supplied by your services, like where else do the normal common day people interact with the two of you, all of you? Like what's the relationship of a homeowner with you guys?
You know, one of the reasons why we created this space is for people to not just think of us as office furniture people. That truly is, I guess, where the majority of our business is. But we also believe these pieces have such a crossover, right? And they are intended for homes, not just offices. And I actually think in a lot of like the homes, especially you guys are selling a lot of these pieces, that's who's coming to find us. This space, it may be a working office, but please know you're always welcome to come in, and there should be someone here available to help you. If you want to just come and look, if you want to, oh, I remember seeing a chair I want to go sit in, and I've seen a magazine picture, and I remember it was over in the corner. This space is open to you. If you're interested in pricing out a piece, any of us here in the office can help you with that. We're not open on weekends. We are still kind of that more office 8 to 5, but it's a working office, but it's also a place for you guys to come gather inspiration. And if we can help, and there are places like DWR to look at online. I believe our pricing is going to be better than that. So you're welcome to order online, but if you want to use us to price shop some of those, we should be able to help you even with a larger I guess, plethora of things like fabrics to put on this, where DWR is just going to have, and DWR is a MillerKnoll company, and we even order from them, but just know that we can kind of give you more choices, I suppose. Is that how you?
More options than what's available
Yeah.
online.
And
Yeah.
I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you order from DWR, I think you pay freight. If you're ordering from us, it does depend on the piece, but especially if it's Miller or Knoll, you're not paying freight. So if that's helpful.
Thank you.
And I just have a womb chair on order, but I got to experience their service. You go through all the textiles, all the fabrics, take them home. No, it's amazing. So you come and you can look at like all the fabrics, take it home, and then order it up, and then someone comes and installs it in the house. It's amazing. You're not going to get that with cutting cardboard in your driveway.
Yeah, and it's not a little fabric sample like this. It's probably more like an 8x8. So you physically can take it home with you. I don't need it back. He brought his back. Thank you. But I don't need it back. Any other questions? Jed did a fabulous job. I think I learned a few things.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah. You can ask us questions in private. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm better one-on-one too. All right. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. And yeah, don't feel like you got to jet out of here at all.